Okay, I think it's recording now. So, hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat here. So, thanks so much for taking the time. And yeah, my name's Mat Marrash. I have been sleeping and breathing this stuff for way too long at this point. Um, and I just kind of had my hands in all sorts of different things, photography, but you kind of have to here in 2022. So, as much as I am a film shooter, it would be kind of weird to say that's all I do because I'm literally using digital camera technology here to broadcast things and wirelessly show you things. So my normal thing I usually haul around is this big old camera that looks like it's 150 years old, but we're actually the same age. I shoot an 8x10" view camera, which creates big old negatives. Let me pull this one out. Big old negatives like this. So instead of loading a 8x10" sheet of paper, this is a coated piece of kind of pricey film. But all the principles that you need to rock an old-timey camera are the exact same things that you would need to run a digital camera. In fact, the same things that I'm running on this main camera here and my other camera that I'm going to have going here in a second, they're all the same. Aperture, shutter speed, ISO, composition, yada, yada, white balance. You got to do the whole thing no matter what you're doing, photo, video, old school film, it all really applies. So practicing with whatever setup you got is going to help any other aspect of photography. But anyways, what I was asked to do tonight is talk about a little bit of one of my favorite ways to get creative in photography, and that's alternative photographic process. Alternative photographic process is anything that isn't a standard black and white traditional silver gelatin print. So, you know, like the old timey darkroom print where you have to have the red light and it's super, super dark. Well, you can tell in my little closet of a darkroom space here that it's not exactly dark. I have lights and all sorts of stuff going on. And that's because alternative photographic processes a lot of times don't worry about our ambient lights or like our indoor type lights. They only like ultraviolet light or UV light. So I do have the door closed here because I forgot May, it's still kind of bright, so I have to keep my door closed. But otherwise, I can do this stuff with the lights on. And the other reason I wanted to talk about alternative photographic process is you can do it with digital pictures, you can do it with phones, and you can also use this as a springboard for even more creativity. You don't even need a camera and a negative to do this process. You can also do what are called photograms, where you physically lay objects right on top of a coated sheet of paper. Oh, and at any time, if you have questions, you can drop those in the chat. I can see those right down below here. So feel free to hit me up or raise a hand or, you know, whatever you need to. And yeah, see, I'm representing everything. It should be worth noting everything here was like purchased at Midwest Photos. So, you know, support local, all that good stuff. And if you want more context for what I'm kind of presenting here tonight, if you want to try this out in person this weekend at Midwest Photo, I have a few spots left available. I'm doing a cyanotype class. So literally you can bring in a picture and make a cyanotype based on what I'm talking about today. So again, alternative photographic process, it's a non-silver process. Cyanotype or I keep saying cyanotype, an easier way to think about it is like a blueprint. So I should have had more prints physically with me, but I also have a folder full of them that I can share here real quick. Let's see. So I've got these guys right here. Oh, does that share the right thing? I don't think it does. Oh yeah, I think it's sharing it. There we go. So the cool thing about Cyanotype is it creates a print that is, yeah, it looks blue. So it takes a black and white negative that I can lay that on top of a coated sheet of paper. And instead of giving me like a normal black and white and gray type print, I can get a really cool cyan or blue toned print. But if you don't like blue, you can also use chemical toning baths to change it and make it brown or green or yellow or whatever you want. The cool thing is it has all sorts of room for creativity. Oops, that's a regular black and white. There we go. There's my pup. That's Mr. Strudel. In fact, Google reminded me that today I made this print that's right here over a year ago. So that's when I kind of springboarded back into all this alternative photographic process stuff. Where's the other ones? There we go. There's another one down Hocking Hills, a very familiar location. And yet another Hocking Hills. I guess I'm a broken record. But the cool thing about cyanotype prints is they're really, really easy to make. It's also one of the most inexpensive alternative photographic processes. So you don't have to do a darkroom. So step one, you can do this in your kitchen. So you don't even have to put pants on to do this if you want. Kind of like all this Zoom meeting stuff, right? Don't worry, I'm wearing pants full of this. But with alt process, you can do this at home. You can do this without a darkroom. So you can do this in like the kitchen or, you know, slop sink in the garage, whatever. You can do that at home, no darkroom, and with really, really inexpensive chemicals and ones that aren't very toxic. So I am going to put on gloves for this today, but that's because I'm probably going to be really sloppy and dirty with the stuff that I do today. The other cool thing I like about Cyanotype is there are ready to make kits. So if you plan on doing like, I don't know, a football field's worth of coating of this stuff, you can mix it up yourself from the constituent chemicals, or you can head over to Midwest Photo and they sell these little kits by Photographer's Formulary. Whenever you see the old timey guy with the camera, you know that's the right kit. The kit gives you 2 of these 500 milliliter bottles of what's called a part A and part B solution, meaning you need equal parts A, equal parts B. And then from there, you can make a whole ton of prints. So 500 mils doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm gonna use, like in this entire demonstration, I'm gonna use like 5 milliliters. So you don't need much of this stuff at all. And this costs 25 bucks. So for 25 bucks, you can probably, I don't know, make a few hundred cyanotype prints. The only downside is you have to keep this stuff in the dark. So that's why it's in a black bottle. You may also see chemicals if you order them from a different website. You may see them come in these brown bottles, or you can see I'm using upcycled kombucha bottles. Don't throw out your glass bottles, they're great. Cyanotype is inexpensive, relatively non-toxic. You don't need a darkroom for it. You don't even need running water access. If you don't want to use your tap water at home, you can run to the old grocery store, CVS, Walgreens, whatever, grab some distilled water, a gallon of that'll set you back about $1. And then you just need some paper or a surface, preferably something that's white or white-ish to coat with, and then something to coat the chemical solution, and then water. That's all you need to make cyanotype happen. So the cool thing is, it doesn't feel like this unattainable thing. Whenever I go to a workshop and I see like a really cool, lofty process, immediately I think, oh, is this something I'm going to be able to do without spending like a few $1,000s? You can get up off the ground with a Cyanotype kit for less than $50. And that's like everything all together to make a whole bunch of different prints. And the best part, because it takes UV light, you don't need any sort of fancy and large or anything crazy. Now, tonight I'm going to be using this homemade DIY exposure unit, but you don't even need that. Here in Ohio, once we hit spring from 10 a.m. till about 6 p.m., all you need is a little sunlight. In direct sun, we can expose our print in about 20 to 30 minutes. And if we're trying to do something on a cloudy day, it's going to take a little longer, about 45 minutes. But you don't even need to have an expensive thing. The light source I'm going to be using, I actually have full tutorial stuff on everything I'm talking about today, and they're up there for free on YouTube. In fact, let me share my screen and show you what those different videos look like. So I'm sending people to the right place. So there is the first, actually that's not the first one, that's the cyanotype one. So I have one on how to make the UV light source that I'm going to be using here in a few minutes, and I also have one on exactly what I'm talking about here, cyanotype process. If you're sick of hearing my voice, you could just mute it and just read the captions and follow along. But it's a pretty easy step-by-step process to get all of that stuff going. Now, I do want to start one thing because this is a live demonstration. So I did a little bit of magic of television stuff. In order to show you results right away, I do need to skip ahead a bit. So I'll give you the quick play-by-play. I'm going to show you how to coat a sheet of paper. This can be really artsy-fartsy paper, or it can just be like a heavier paper stock. It could even be a t-shirt that you don't like anymore, or a beach towel or something. You can do a cyanotype on anything. It's essentially a blueprint, but the smoother the material, the better. So we're going to coat a piece of paper. We're going to expose it once it dries, and we're going to place something on top of that to prevent exposure. So if I place the leaf on it, it's going to just be the shape of a leaf. But if I use a photographic negative, or in the digital sense, a digital negative, one that's printed on an inkjet material, place that, we're going to expose it for roughly 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, we're going to rinse it, and we're going to have a finished blueprint or cyanotype when we're done. So I'm going to head over to my exposure unit. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to rent and set up a third camera, but you'll probably hear me fumbling around with that. I'm going to take a negative that I've already previously tested, magic of television and all. I'm going to take a negative, I think, yeah, this one's good. So I'm going to take this and take a piece of paper that I've already coated with the special sauce. It has this yellowish green appearance. I'm going to lay the negative on top of this, and I'm going to expose it for about 20 minutes. Oh, and the one thing I need to do, because this is called a contact printing process, I need to squeeze that negative down as tight as I can to the paper. Now, it doesn't have to be tight, but it'll be soft if I'm not giving it pressure. So to give it pressure, you can just use a piece of heavy glass and like a couple gallons of milk or something on top, something to weigh it down. Now, in the photography sense, you can go ham and get a really fancy thing. Of course I did. This is what's called a contact print frame. It's just got these big old springs on the back, and it's going to press everything together. So I'm going to head out and get that printing, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to coat a sheet of this paper. Because they're really inexpensive. I bought all the LED stuff and I have a full video on how to assemble it. It cost me all of $60 US plus some spare plywood that was lying around in my house. You could probably do it for even less. They sell these LED tanning lamps. I think Mark Full picked up one of those and was using it for alt process, and it does really well. So yeah, right now I'm exposing my print for about 20 minutes. So yeah, that means I have to talk for at least 20 more minutes, but we're gonna try to make it engaging. So I've got that exposing, but what was that piece of paper I had in the first place? That was my coated material. So I wanna show you guys how to coat all of your stuff. I'm gonna start by disabling one camera right there. I'm going to switch to my other camera. And oops, I got muted. There we go. Now I'm back. All right. Uh-oh. My other camera does not want to go at the moment. Let's try. Maybe it doesn't like my cable. That's fine. Try the other cable. All right. So my other camera here is just a big old fisheye lens. It's one of those manual focus 7 Artisans lenses. They do a pretty cool job. I just don't know why it's not picking up. Let's try one more time. Come on. I suppose the other thing I could do, let's turn it off, turn it on again. That's the beauty of doing something live. Oh, there it is. And then it went away. Why did it do that? Is it not doing the thing? Why did it go away? It caught me for a second. My apologies, everybody. There's always something. Okay, there we go. That's what we want to see. Perfect. All right. Everybody can see my hand? Great. All right. So, what? What in the Sam? All right. Calling in an audible. What is going on? Let's see. Is my USB connection doing something weird? USB tether shitting. Try this. It's showing it, so great. There's something it doesn't like.
I think you have to leave your hand there, Matt.
I wish that's all it was. It appears that it is a greater USB thing. No, it just does not like this camera. Well, that's all right. I guess we have two. All right. So I'm doing a little camera surgery here real quick. So no matter what you ever set up for on a live event, something will always do something it's never done before in front of a crowd, even if you've tested it time and time again. But that's just the nature of the beast. So I'm adding my wide angle lens to my primary camera. If I was just going to use one camera and flail around, I could have just done that quicker. All right, so let's try this camera, this cable, because it likes that. That's a known entity. Okay, we're back. Don't kick me out. Okay, cool. So I have this little table here. This is just a piece of galvanized, so I can have these little magnets. These magnets, well, let's see what those are for in a sec. They're for holding down my paper. But safety first, I just use some nitrile gloves. By the way, if you buy too many pairs of gloves and too much distilled water at the same place, you're going to get carded. That's at Walgreens and CVS. Ask me how I know. I also tend to buy a lot of potentially dangerous photochemicals, so I'm also like on a list, but it's all good. Okay, so you can see that all right. I got my gloves on. I have my photographer's formulary kit. I have a few hundred mils of solution A and solution B, but we are not going to use much of any of this. I'm just going to dump out equal amounts of A and B into one of my little holders here, a little beaker. This will help me make sure I've got the right amount. Now, let's see, let's get 10 mils. So I've got 10 mils of A. This is important. You need to do this in subdued light. Keyword subdued. So it can't be anything that's like outdoor light. Indoor light is good. Outdoor light, not so good. Okay, got 10 mils of B. That's in there. I'm going to mix this stuff up just ever so gently. Give it a swirl like that. Okay, and now I'm ready for my next step. Coating. So I need a paper to coat on, and one of my favorite papers for alternative photographic process is this stuff right here. This is called Hahnemühle Platinum Rag. Now, Hahnemühle, if you've ever done high-end inkjet prints, you'll know they have very, very expensive inkjet paper for that. But they also, because they are the world's oldest paper, one of the world's oldest paper mills, they have regular watercolor paper. So you can also go to Dick Blick or any fine art store that you like and grab a pad of watercolor paper, and you can get a good result with that too. This is a photo specialty paper called their Platinum Rag. I buy it on a giant roll because I just pour through photographic materials, and it's cheaper for me to buy a roll. But you can see when it comes on a roll, anybody who's done art printing on fiber paper will tell you, gosh, it's curly. That's why sometimes it's better to pay Midwest Photo to do it. But in this case, I've got my paper, and to hold that down, these little magnets are going to do a ton of the heavy lifting. I'll pop one magnet on here, one magnet on here, and then a little bit on the sides. Ta-da, and ta-da. And I'm just going to get ready to coat this up. Now, I've got my paper, I have my sensitizer. Now I need to measure out an amount of this that's going to cover a sheet of paper. For an 8 by 10 inch size print, I found about 40 drops of solution, or roughly 5 milliliters is all we need. I don't go by milliliters, I go by drops, because as you do different alternative photographic processes, this stuff is going to get much, much, much more expensive. So I'm going to count up 40 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't have to count for the entire audience here, so I also just do a little dropper full. Like that, and a little bit for good measure. Okay, and that's going to be enough to do it. Now the last thing I need is a brush. So this is a really fancy little hockey brush. I also got this from Dick Blick. You don't have to use a fancy brush. You can also use an old Full foam brush. You can get, I think, like 20 of these for $5 at your local home improvement store. And then if you want to do big old prints, you can get a big sucker like this. So all sorts of fun stuff there. Now, you see the Mountain Dew looking sauce I have here. Don't drink this stuff. Pretty please, don't drink it. Don't rub it on your skin. Don't take a bath with it. That's all you'll need. So this, dry off my brush. And this is the fun part. I am not, one thing I like about photography is it makes me feel creative, but it's not really a hands-on type creative unless you make it. And this makes it incredibly so, because I feel like I'm painting here. So get this going on, I can start brushing out. Now you'll see it's just a big yellowish puddle at the moment, and I have to keep spreading it out. The reason we keep spreading it out is because this is watercolor paper. It's meant to drink up all sorts of solution. Drink up, drink up, drink up. And keep moving it around so I don't get any puddling or pooling. The smoother your paper and the better you spread it, the nicer and more even all of your lines and everything in your picture will come out. Now, if you're just doing a photogram, which is something that doesn't involve a negative, you just lay something like a plant on top of it, you don't have to worry about this so much. But if you have something that's a real nice fine art print where you have lots of tiny little details, nice smooth brush and a nice smooth finish will do a great job. And you can see it's drying really, really quick, but the paper's also kind of bowing up a little bit. That's because it's drinking and swelling. So just keep it moving. You can see I'm like alternating my directions here. It's just one pass, left, right, up and down. Just keep it moving around. And once it gets to a point where the puddles don't have as many marks on the edges from being pushed outside of the brush, that's when I know it's time to pull it up. Okay. Now, most alternative photographic processes have something similar. You have to hand coat your emulsion. So emulsion, just another word for a fancier word for a mixture of all of my chemicals that are going to be light sensitive. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Pull up my magnets. All my magnets pulled up. Okay, scab off my edges here. There we go. Does not have to be the finest work in the world, but if you want it extra artsy, you can add some extra brush strokes on the edge. There we go. And we have one coated sheet of paper. I'm just going to go hang this up and let this dry. This will dry without any sort of forced air in about 30 minutes. If you live in the American Southwest, it'll dry in about 10 minutes flat. And again, you want this to dry in an area that is not going to have a lot of direct sun or like ambient, UV light coming in. So you don't want to do this by a window in a basement or a garage. It's going to work great. So I'm going to take my little plated steel coating station, move this out of the way. And we're going to prepare our really, really super fancy, super expensive developer. Just kidding. It's not fancy at all. All you need is water. Now, I do have some other bottles of chemicals and stuff over here, and I'll talk those through as we go. But you don't need a lot to make this happen. You need the Cyanotype Kit. You need something to coat it on, something inexpensive to move stuff around, and then some running water. It doesn't even have to be running, but running really helps because we're going to have to wash off all of those unexposed areas of emulsion here pretty soon. The one big if on the water supply is if you're not sure what type of water you have. If you have hard water, this is actually a good time to have hard water. Hard water has a little bit more acid in it, and you want something that's relatively acidic because this process likes a tiny bit of acid. If you need to add acid to your water, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can grind up some vitamin C tablets. About half of a vitamin C tablet will be enough to acidify your water. You can also use something that everybody probably has at home, white vinegar. You don't have to get distilled. You could also use apple cider vinegar. You can also use a half of a lemon, nice squeeze of lemon juice. Or if you want to go industrial, vinegar is nothing more than acetic acid. You can go right to the source and get the pure stuff. So this is like this tiny amount of this stuff, glacial acetic acid. This is equal to about 6 whole bottles of this. So a little dabble did he have. But that's also why the gloves. So a lot of photochemicals are usually really, really nasty. The stuff for cyanotype, again, isn't too bad. If you get some on your hands, you can just wash it off with warm water and soap, and you'll be good to go. And it should go without saying, but please don't drink this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to fill up my tray with some water. Room temperature water is fine. Some folks like it a little bit hotter. Doesn't matter too much. You don't want it to be ice cold. And the reason I'm pre-filling my tray, you can also use running water to rinse things off, but I find that it harms the print if you're too aggressive with how the water starts moving around. There we go. Let's get a little bit of water going in. And I've got about a little less than 5 minutes on the clock until my first exposure, the one that I ran out to start making, is done. Very, very cool. All right. Does anybody have any questions so far on cyanotype? Just, well, I've got about 5 minutes or so. Anybody?
Yes, I've got one.
Yes.
A lot of us are, Mark, are digital photographers, and you talked about a digital negative. How does one make a digital negative?
So to make a digital negative, you want to have access to a software like Photoshop that will allow you to create an inversion of that image. This is a black and white type process. So even if you have a color picture, you're going to have a black and white result. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to convert that file that you have or invert it into a black and white negative. Now that's in its simplest terms. There are a bunch of different apps out there for helping you kind of add a curve. So I'm sure we've all heard of curves, or that characteristic curve that a photograph has. The type of negative that you'll need, digital or film, you need a negative that's really, really dense, that has a lot of areas that are really dark and very few of those areas that are super, super light. Now, because I've got the wide angle here, I should be able to show a negative that has a decent amount of density. So this is an original 8x10 inch in-camera negative. But if you make a digital negative, you're going to want something that's kind of similar. So all of these areas that are really dark here on my negative, those are going to prevent that ultraviolet light from coming through. And all of these more clear areas on the negative, the UV light is going to penetrate and it's going to harden that emulsion to the paper. So when I pull out my exposed print, you're going to see a blue border around that because there was nothing covered by the negative. And then what's going to happen is as it hits the water, it's going to wash away all of the stuff that the darker parts of the negative prevented seeing that. There is a free download that you can add with Photoshop to create a digital negative. It's called ChartThrob. So ChartThrob. And they have a free download and tutorials on how to turn any color or black and white digital photo into a negative. Now, the other thing that you'll need, not just how to create the digital file, you'll also need a material, something to print it out on. And Midwest Photo actually sells that printing material. They sell 2 different brands. They sell one from InkPress and one from ProMaster, and those are going to be called inkjet transparency material or digital negative material. You can buy a box of 25 of those sheets for about 20 bucks. So if you're a digital photographer, your upfront costs go up to about $75 working with the sum. And then if you're a film photographer, and this works with any size film, you can get there for about 50 bucks. Now, this is a contact printing process, meaning that the size of your original is the size of your print. So one advantage to shooting these big expensive things is I can make an 8x10 inch size print from it, but I could enlarge. I've actually seen really great cyanotypes made from cell phone pictures. So it really doesn't matter what you shoot, you can get in on this process. But if you just want to experiment with this to see if you like it, you don't even need a negative. You can, well, maybe not lay your hand on it, but you can lay materials like this in the spring. This is a great time to take plants and leaves and all sorts of cool stuff and lay it against the cyanotype material and create a photogram. They're just a great creative outlet that way. Okay, I'm going to grab my exposed prints, and we're going to go ahead and develop that out. Thousands of dollars. And now LEDs are just like these super inexpensive things that make life really, really easy. All right, you guys ready to see what this looks like? Isn't that weird? So I do have a positive print, and it's actually a relatively dark, kind of flat, faint image, but it's not going to look like this in a few short seconds. So you can see the area that has been, I always like say grossly overexposed, it's no longer even blue. It has like a brownish appearance. But as soon as it hits the water, that reaction, oh, I need to add a little bit of acid because the water up here is not very acidic. That's vinegar, a little bit of that. Don't have to be too precise. I just need a little more acid than that. Go. Move that around. Now my darkroom smells great. Smells like I've been canning. Okay. Yeah, so if you can do canning at home, you can do a whole process. Okay, so we're gonna drop this in and we're gonna see what our print looks like. Oh, all right. So we are in the development step now. And over the course of the next few minutes, that area that got super, super, super exposed is going to deepen into a blue color, and that yellowish color will slowly leave the rest of my cyanotype print. Now, another thing that you can do, depending on the material you're using, if you're using a really absorbent material like fabric or like a towel or something, anything that has lots of ridges to it, you're going to want to coat that material 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times in order to have enough emulsion soaked in to give you a really, really nice print. Now, this picture is still relatively light, but I like it because this was a shot that I took in the winter. So on the ground here, there's actually a bunch of snow. I took this shot. Still a little bit light, but hey, not too bad. And when you make a cyanotype print, what the blue looks like now is actually not what it's going to look like when it's dry. If you're a super impatient human being like myself, you can actually find out what it's going to look like when it's done. And you can do that with an extra bath that has another additive to it. So I'm going to, oh yeah, that actually looks pretty good. I'm losing a little detail over here in the snow, but nothing that I'm going to lose sleep over. Looks pretty cool. And again, I've got the lights on. I haven't bought an expensive enlarger, really expensive paper. Oh, and I want to show you guys that the magic of television is real. Here was my first test prints. Whenever you do a new cyanotype mix, you always want to test what your exposure time is. You can do this with a tiny strip of material. This is a 10-minute exposure, which is clearly not enough. And there's what 20 minutes does. Most times in direct sun, you'll need about 20 minutes. I was hoping against hope that my source was a little bit better than that. So I'm going to create another bath here off camera. Here's some water going. And in that other bath, I'm just going to add some more water, and then I'm going to add a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. You know, the stuff that that mom and dad used to pour on some scrapes and bumps and bruises. About 5 mils of this to each liter of liquid to accelerate the cyan conversion. And in terms of cyan, you see how this one's a lot darker blue? It's like this beautiful navy color. That's because this print has had a little bit longer to dry. But if, you guys probably don't want me to talk here for like 55 minutes and wait for it to turn blue. So we'll do it instantly with some hydrogen peroxide. So pull this one out. Move this in. And again, this is not the most precision process on planet Earth. A little squirt of hydrogen peroxide is all it needs. Just a little bit of that peroxide is going to reduce what's remaining of the emulsion, and it's going to convert instantly. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Let's pop it in. And you can see it's getting darker instantly. There it goes. It's kind of fading from top to bottom. Now, if your print is not completely washed out when you do this, it will seal in any of that yellow or teal color that it has. So you want to make sure it's pretty thoroughly rinsed. I use a really acidic bath, so it's actually already ready to go. And look at that beautiful blue. It's almost indigo color to it. Now, again, if you're not a fan of blue, you can use a few bags of your favorite green or black tea and soak this in tea water for about 20 minutes and it'll tone it. You can also use really crappy instant coffee and that will give you a coffee or brown color, but coffee will stain the paper itself. You can also use, if you're a little more eco-conscious, you can also use things like walnuts or any sort of nuts or seeds or berries that would give you a natural stain. You can do the same thing for this print. In fact, there is an alternative process for using plant-based dyes, and that's called the Chrysotype. So what's so cool about this particular thing, alternative photographic process, this is the tip of the iceberg. If you feel like you want to keep doing this hand coding type stuff and making prints like this, if you like cyanotype, or even find, you know what, I want to explore this more, there are dozens of alternative photographic processes, but I recommend doing it here because if you can make one of these, you have all the skills you need to do other alternative processes. Now, as much as I like wearing blue, I don't like a lot of my prints blue. So I actually opted for another alternative process that's a little bit more expensive than a cyanotype. And I do what's called the calotype process, or calotype process. It creates like a brownish black print that is a little more stable, but it has slightly different requirements of the negative, but it still gives me a really neat effect at the end of the day. And then if you really want to see your money go up in flames on a print, you can also do platinum palladium process, which is, with the cost of metals right now, not a cheap thing. But the cool thing is it makes very, very, very fancy long tonal range prints that will literally last lifetimes. Even these prints, we know this type of print is completely archival once it's washed because cyanotype and other alternative process prints have been around for 160 plus years. Some of the very earliest photographic processes were alternative processes because the thing they were an alternative to hadn't been invented yet. So that's kind of the magic of this process. Does anybody have any other questions about cyanotypes and such? This is kind of what I was thinking would be like the more logical end of things, but I really want to encourage folks to look into this a little bit more. Check out the. Actually, I'm going to drop links to the video while any folks are working up questions if they have any, because it's such a fun process to try. So that's the cyanotype video. And then if you want to build an LED light, here's how to build the LED light, which is really inexpensive stuff that's on Amazon.
Matt, do you have a specific weight of paper, watercolor paper you prefer?
Oh yes, the stuff that I'm using here today, the Hanamula Platinum Rag, this stuff is, I don't want to say perfect, but it is the perfect watercolor paper for alternative process because it was actually created for hand coding processes. And in fact, Midwest Photo does stock the pre-cut sheets of this at the store. It comes in like a silver package and it's called Platinum Rag.
Is any specific weight? Because I used to do watercolors. Is it medium weight, lightweight paper, heavyweight paper?
Oh no, this is heavy. So this stuff I think is like a 320 or 310 GSM. So it's a very, very heavy stock of paper. I would recommend for cyanotype, because you're doing so much pushing in with a brush, you probably want a paper that's 100 grams or heavier. So you can do it with finer papers like rice papers or any of the Kozo type papers, but they are very, very delicate and really easy to tear. So I do recommend the heavy stuff. And again, in terms of texture, I do like a paper that has little to no texture. So I can focus in on it. This paper has no texture whatsoever. And because it's a watercolor paper, it's actually usable on both sides. Oh yeah, I'm the kind of guy that they give me weird eyes because I'll open up all the drawers at Dick Flick and I'm like feeling up all the papers. They're like, sir, are you okay? Yeah, I just gotta make sure it's nice and smooth.
So hey Matt, at what point in the process do you, let's say you, for example, didn't want it blue and you wanted to add some brown or whatever, at what point in the process do you do that? Do you add the coffee grounds or whatever it is you're going to add to tone it differently?
So toning, I've seen some folks do it immediately after the final wash, which is about 20 more minutes of changing out water in here. So like right now, this was kind of a quick and dirty demo print, but I just need a few more water baths in this, hang it up overnight, and it's ready to go, and it'll be archival. Now, if I want to tone it, it's recommended that I wait until the next day. So I can take this out, hang it up to dry. Don't try to force it by blow drying or anything. You really want it to settle and let those fibers kind of hold to the paper. And after that, that's when I can re-wet it and tone it. And that's why it's important to use a watercolor paper, because when you use watercolor papers, they are able to withstand wetting, drying. You can probably do that 10, 15 times before the fibers of the paper start to break down and weaken.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Cool.
Yeah, toning that's the cool thing about this. Like the rules are you use equal parts A, equal parts B, and have fun. Those are kind of the rules. Yeah, and don't drink it. That's about it. Like everything else, have fun with it. You don't need a special UV light source. You can use the sun. This is a great activity for photo students. If you've got if you want to have a photographic practice that kids can play around with, this is a great activity for kids. You can buy, like blank t-shirts, a blank set of jeans, and do a cyanotype on that. I've seen some folks use a flexible negative material with like a cellophane and do this on a pair of blank shoes. There's so many cool things you can do with it. And it feels handmade. Like the cool thing is I can't draw or paint to save my life, but this feels really handmade. Like you can see all the brush strokes and all of that cool stuff. Imperfection is the name of the game with this. If we wanted it perfect, we could have just paid somebody to shoot out a print. Cool. Does anybody else have any questions about alt process in general, or anything film photography? I'm trying to be an open book about this stuff.
Yeah, when you just said something about it needs a couple more water baths, does that mean
Yes,
you're going to change out that water, or is that why you were raising it in and out of the water so many times?
Oh, good question. No, I was just, I'm finicky and very, I need to be doing something with my hands at all times, especially when there's a camera. So no, a different water bath, I would actually change out the water completely. So the more eco-friendly way to do it is you can keep recycling this water through, but after a few too many of the same bath, you'll want to change it out completely. So this will set your water bill back, I guess, a little bit more, but no more than like a half bath or so. So yeah, changing water bath out, just completely get rid of this water and get some fresh stuff in there. And they recommend about 20 minutes. Oh, and the other cool thing is, even if, after watching this recorded thing and watching the YouTube video, you're like, I forgot a few bits. There's a full complete instruction kit that comes with this particular kit. So Photographer's Formulary, this is one of the best sources for chemicals in the US. They come with their material safety data sheet, which is the chemical sheet to make sure you don't hurt yourself, and little step-by-step instructions. In fact, this even comes with, I just learned this today, this kit also comes with a few spare bits, and they give you this stuff, which is called Arrowroot Starch. This is a chemical that allows you to do what's called sizing of paper. Now, some papers just don't want to hold on to a photographic emulsion. And sizing on a paper is a way to get that emulsion to kind of stick. So you can think of this more like a glue. So even though it's starch, it acts like a glue to hold the emulsion. And then I didn't know the kit came with this. You can see it's real fun stuff because of how many warning labels there are above it. Now this stuff is, I do want to show folks this because it is not the nicest stuff on planet Earth. And some alternative processes use this chemical. This is called potassium dichromate, also known as super cancer if you touch it. So I said it to scare folks, but you really don't want to breathe this stuff in or let it touch your skin or anything. So this is actually an optional thing. It's there to add contrast. You can see it's like, what's that? It's like a few grams of the stuff. This, you can mix it into 2 liters of water and it will turn everything electric orange. And then you only need a few milliliters of that solution to make the contrast, so the difference between black and white really pop. So the other cool thing about alternative process is you're using chemicals to change things that you could change digitally. So everything that we do in Photoshop had its origins here in the darkroom. Dodging, burning, and all the other stuff can be modified with parts of the process, not just a digital thing.
So speaking of dodging and burning then, what types of photographs, if you're going to make, let's say it's a digital photographer like myself, what types of photo, would you want really high contrast photographs, or are there certain types of photographs that work better than others for this type of process?
That's a really good question. I tend to like photographs that have a little more punch than not. So photographs that are maybe really high in contrast, or if you have a color photograph that has a lot of contrast. So let's see, does my other camera want to work now? Let's see. Maybe no. Because we're at the shop. Okay. So you want a picture that usually has a good amount of contrast, even if it's a color picture that has a lot of complementary colors. So your red versus green, orange versus blue, that whole sort of thing. You want to have a good amount of contrast in there that can really help. I also tend to like, because it hides all of my mistakes that I make along the way, getting a photograph that has a lot of textures is really, really busy. So if you have something like a blue sky with cyanotype, you'll see all sorts of lines and streaks from hand coding the stuff. So that may not do as well as a print that's, doesn't utilize clear skies or even tonalities. Come on. Okay, good. It actually worked this time. Sweet. And let's turn it up. Can I turn it up? Okay, that's cool. You can see my camera now. So I would recommend using a photograph that has a little more punch than not, so a little bit more contrast. Open this door up here, because now that's not really doing much for my light. That's great. You do want something that has a little bit more punch, but you can really use any photograph. And again, if you don't even have a negative and you just want to try this process out, you can do a photogram. So you can take a leaf or a cool flower with some really delicate petals, and you can press it on a piece of glass, and you can get some really, really neat stuff with this. So, I mean, you could even take, if the doctor let you take home the X-ray that shows a broken bone, you could just slap one of those on some paper too, because that's actually a film negative, the old X-rays. Cool. All right.
You're weird,
yeah,
Matt. You're
I
weird,
am.
Matt.
I am. That's fine. You kind of get. I think I'm definitely getting weirder as I go, and some of it has to do with inhaling some of these chemicals as they're coming off of the bath. That's definitely a factor. But one thing I like about it is everybody I work with in alternative photographic process, they're a little bit weird too. You got to be to enjoy the methodical bits of setting up this camera or setting up this process. It's a delayed type of reward. So if you still listen to records or brew your own coffee or grow plants at home, you're going to be right at home with this type of photographic process. Really helps to have some extra time though.
I think most artistic geniuses are a little weird.
I'll say yes to that, just because it keeps me weird.
Is that your excuse, Richard?
Hey, Matt, I see a question here from Carrie.
Oh,
It says, can you put it on metal?
ooh, okay. So the question is, with alternative process, a lot of times the answer is yes, but. And in this case, it's a big yes, but you can do a cyanotype on metal. The only downside to coating something on a metal is you'll have to make sure it's a metal that's like mildly reactive. So this would do well on something like aluminum, or like a stainless wouldn't do so well. But I think aluminum would help on there. And you would have to pre-treat the metal with a sizing. So I don't think the Arrowroot Starch that comes with this particular kit would be enough. There are special treating chemicals out there for that. There's a brilliant website that outlines a lot of these alternative photographic processes. It's just called alternativephotography.com. They're kind of the Wikipedia of alt process. It's where a lot of people in the alternative process community got their start before. I mean, this website's been around since before Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. So, and it doesn't have the same kind of like back and forth bickering that you see on a lot of social media, just because it's like blog style of posting. And there's also a lot of great books on alternative photographic process. So if you do want to pursue things like doing this on glass, doing this on metal, you can do this on rock. All of the outlines for those, you'll see some of those on alternativephotography.com. There's also a fantastic author. She's an amazing creator in alternative photography. Her name is Christina Z. Anderson. If there's an alt process, she literally has like a full tome on how to do it with fantastic examples. So yeah, the answer is yes, but you probably need some extra tools to do it. If you're just working with paper or fabric, everything I outlined will work on that.
So Matt, I have a question. And speaking of Christina Anderson, because I had researched her a little bit, and she also just co-authored a book on what's the RIP software for creating the digital negative.
I know quad tone is one of them, but
that's the one.
Yeah,
and she just co-authored a book on quad tone and how to make a digital negative. Do you think a RIP software like that, and I don't think that's anything that's expensive. Quad tone is pretty inexpensive, if I remember correctly, but
yeah.
is necessary or the best? I know I just made my digital negative when I did it in Photoshop by inverting, as you said, and just increasing the contrast and all of that. But
Yeah.
But quad tone supposedly kind of helps you really. And I just wondered your opinion about that on creating the digital negative, if you think that's advisable or necessary, or what your thoughts are.
Well, you can kind of do it two ways. So if you're an experimenter and you don't mind going through like the iterations and everything, you can just go with Photoshop and be done with it. That other resource I talked about, ChartThrob, they're kind of a good in-between because they're open source. They're completely free. So if you want to dip your toe in and you want to add a little bit more time to it, you can use their stuff. But then when you start to get into the more professional software packages like QTR, Quad Tone RIP, and some of the other ones that are out there, those ones, a lot of the kinks are ironed out. But the other thing that you have to think about with those softwares is it's somebody else's look, right? So like somebody has created this curve for their process. The other thing that makes alternative process unique is you can cater it to your own situation. So, you know, here I've catered everything to the Franklinton tap water, which if you live around Franklinton, you know is different depending on how much construction is going on in your COSI. So right now, my process and my negatives work well for my darkroom, but if I even took this down the street somewhere else, it may be slightly different. That can be a maddening thing for someone that likes consistency, or if you like the artsy, unpredictable stuff, it can be fun too. But I have used QTR in the past, or Quad Tone RIP. So for those that are like hearing me ramble off all of these acronyms, a RIP is what's known as a raster image profiler. This is a very specific piece of software that allows the photographer to change how the image is rendered out prior to printing. It actually gives you direct control over the drivers and the individual like print heads and ink wells of a printer. So you can say, you're basically hijacking what the printer and the software want to do, and you're giving it an extra set of instructions. It's something that used to be necessary in like the DOS days. Yes, it doesn't look like it, but I do remember the DOS days of computers where you had a floppy disk, so 5-inch floppies and stuff. But now it's all pretty much automatic. So if you want to have that more granular control, that's what those software suites are for. So the other thing I like about Cyanotype though is you can get into the weeds and technical if you want, or you can just kind of wing it. I literally just threw out a test print on this setup before I got started, and it ended up great because once you do one alt process, a lot of them are going to be very, very similar. You're just changing out the chemicals a little bit. So instead of something that turns blue, it's something that turns green or brown.
Cool. Yeah, I'm into that. I mean, I just winging it is my middle name, so that's good. Any other questions?
Well, yeah. Hit me up with any questions. I want to be an open book about this stuff. I checked at Midwest Photo before I purchased one of their kits. I think they have 3 more of these kits left. And I mean, honestly, I've used maybe 15 milliliters of this kit, which means I'm gonna have to make a whole ton of prints here in the next week, which is good. Again, I have that class coming up on Saturday afternoon at Midwest Photo, where actually that class, you'll be able to bring a digital file, make a digital neg, and then we actually print that out that night on a LED UV source. So it's kind of a fun little hands-on type experience. But this is something that you can do hands-on as long as you have the right chemicals, which the pre-made kits are the way to go. Oh, there's two main suppliers I guess I want to mention when it comes to alternative photographic process. One of them, which you'll find stock of at Midwest Photo, is Photographer's Formulary, or photoformulary.com. Actually, I'll put the link in there. So photoformulary.com. The other one is called Bostic and Sullivan. Bostic and Sullivan is based out of New Mexico, and they are awesome. I've actually visited their facilities before. They will sell component chemicals and all sorts of so raw materials, as well as like ready to go kits with really easy to follow instructions. Oh, all right, we do have another question. So Debbie asked, how long is the sensitizer good for? So these ones that I just cracked open are fine as long as they stay in the bottle and they stay light. But let's say, what about the stuff that I have left over that I mixed up earlier? This stuff is going to be good for about 2 to 4 hours as it is right now. And the important thing is you don't want to mix A and B together unless you're going to use it. So this stuff, I've got two choices. I can either make, let's see, I can either make 3 more prints, or down the drain with plenty of water it goes. So I'm probably just going to still stick around and make some more example prints. But this stuff's good for about 2 to 4 hours. Again, have to keep it out of the sun, and you don't want to mix it with any other weird stuff. I mentioned earlier that orange stuff, the potassium dichromate, you can also use sodium dichromate. That orange contrast agent, that is something that you add to the sensitizer before you coat it on there, and that is going to increase the contrast. Basically what it's doing, it acts as what this thing in black and white chemistry we call a restrainer. It prevents, it basically forces more light to cause the same chemical reaction. But imagine if it does that hardening thing to your cells. Yeah, use gloves.
So you couldn't take that premix or the stuff that you just mixed and put it in a dark brown bottle or something and keep it longer than several hours, or?
I could, but there's a really fascinating thing that happens with these more primitive processes. And it's called the dark effect. It sounds way cooler than it is. But basically, the longer it kind of sits ready to go, but hasn't been used or exposed, it will spontaneously create little areas of exposure. So if I, let's say, leave this overnight and then coat in the morning and do that whole thing, what could happen is my prints will just be like all blue or all teal. It's not gonna, and sometimes it looks like Dalmatian spots, like it's totally random. So since there's already enough factors going on, enough like things to control, I recommend just go, when in doubt, throw it out, flush it down the drain and start again, especially with these kits, because again, each kit is capable of doing hundreds of prints. So yeah, if you're not sure, even if you're like, oh, did I add too much of this or that, just start again. It's usually really inexpensive. Now, if you're doing a process that's very expensive, so actually I might as well talk about costs because I guess we have some time. Cyanotype, again, this whole kit, if I put everything that I've shown you together price-wise, even the fancier stuff, I have less than $200 tied up in this. You can barely buy a crappy lens for $200 on a digital camera. So, don't hit me with this process is expensive. This process is time consuming, I'll give you that, but expensive, it's not even close versus other photo stuff. That all goes out the window once you start looking into the really fancy stuff. So if you go on forums for alternative process, you'll always hear folks talking up platinum palladium. Each platinum palladium print, if I were to fire off an 8x10 one of those, just the raw chemicals, I'll have to measure them out precisely because otherwise I'm just wasting metal. Each drop of this solution, once it goes on there, is about $4. And I need roughly 40 drops to make a print. It is not great, but it will last like literally longer than most of my extended family for generations.
Matt,
All right. Yes.
I was going through that other site you talked about, the chemicals, and it looks like they
Mhm.
originally called it Van Dyke Brown printing process. And they
Yes.
use ferric ammonia site. Is that as easy as this?
So the top two processes in alternative process that you'll hear folks talk about are cyanotype and VDB, or Van Dyke Brown. They're very similar processes. I like cyanotype because it's more versatile. It's also slightly more forgiving than Van Dyke Brown. Now, the first process I tackled was Van Dyke Brown because the school that I went to had a kit that was of questionable, origins, and we didn't know how old it was, but I coated some and made it work. The downside with Van Dyke Brown is it requires negatives that are a little more dense. So if I were to do the same process with the same negative I had tonight, I may need even more contrasty negative, or I would have to reduce my exposure time. So you can't strictly translate one alternative process to the other, but the rules are kind of the same. So it's kind of like, you can't take a taco recipe and make gyros. Some parts feel similar, but you're probably, if you combine the two without knowing what you're doing, it's going to be a total mess.
But I'm talking about exposure of the print. Is it, if you need sunlight, you need special light on that? Is that the same?
Yeah. In terms of overall process, as long as it's an alternative process, it's going to use ultraviolet light. So Van Dyke Brown, cyanotype, platinum palladium, calotypes, all of those will use ultraviolet light. So the same rules apply: subdued light, only direct sunlight or specialty UV LED light when it's time to print. The longer something sits out, even in a room with an open window, you're going to, have exposure that happens.
Thanks. I'm going to try that Van Dyke Brown.
Oh yeah, it's a cool one. Now the thing with Van Dyke, they don't tone very well, but then just get ready to have really, really high contrast negatives, like super dense.
You mean like, okay, that's no problem with that. Great.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah, you get that GFX. You can do whatever you need with those images.
So what time is your workshop this weekend at Midwest? Is that on Saturday, Sunday, or?
Oh yeah, that's on Saturday. Actually, let me pull up the site for it. That's the beauty of Zoom. That is Saturday afternoon. I believe it starts at 2:30 and we go till 5:30, but probably because it's a longer process, we're probably going to take it all the way until they kick me out at 6. Oh no, I'm sorry. That one starts at 1. Okay, so we're probably going to go 1 to 5 on Saturday for that.
Okay.
And there's a few spots for that, and most of the registration fee is really just paying me to make a digital negative and get all that stuff going. But you'll leave having seen your print develop. Unfortunately, it's not long enough to let the print dry, so you'll have to come back. Have to come back to the toy store another day to pick up your print. It's the worst.
That's a good marketing technique there.
Yes, all the film classes are like that, but that's the one thing I miss about my favorite workshops I've ever taken were always out in New Mexico, because whenever you do a film photography workshop out there, your film and your prints, they're dry in like 20 minutes. It's just so dry out there. So that's the other cool thing about these processes. Where you do them is just as important as how you do them. So if you're somebody that has, let's say you're going down to Florida and you want to do these, you have a whole different set of variables from the humidity and the heat than somebody that lives on the East Coast versus someone that's on the West Coast. So all these little things kind of add up to it. And then, there's so many trials and tribulations that even just getting one print that kind of looks okay, you're just like, yes, I did it. And that's the other thing. It feels handmade. What can you do with a digital camera that's slopping through water and stuff like this that isn't a GoPro? Like it doesn't happen.
So quick question on that, because it's a trial and error as to how long, depending upon your environment, the exposure is going to be. So can you kind of open up your contact thing like as you go along and say, oh, like kind of opening your oven door and saying, no, my bread needs 10 minutes longer. Can you do that, or?
You can actually. Let me go grab my print frame because that's a great question. Now, the one I'm using is, I only got it because it was on sale. Uh, uh, Most contact print frames are literally just a glass and felt sandwich. This one is a glass, felt, and big frame sandwich. So the negative gets placed on top of here, but the cool part of this one is on the back, it's got this hinge and spring mechanism. So while it's still pressing everything together, I can actually open it up halfway through the exposure and take a quick peek and see how it's going. Now, because the print changes in color and tonality as I start washing it, I'd still have to have a pretty trained eye to be able to, peek and actually figure out if it's doing the right thing. But if you get a contact printing frame, these are available new. This is actually a photographer's formulary one. God, I feel like this is like a sponsored workshop. I promise it's not. They just have really cool stuff. They also don't card. So like if you if you buy a whole ton of chemicals, you're not going to get a call from the DEA, or you're not going to be on a no-fly list for buying their stuff. Ask me how I know. So yeah. And I always demo this stuff with giant old negatives. You don't have to do big old expensive. You don't have to go buy a large format camera to do this stuff. In fact, I'd recommend starting out with some spring leaves or some little flowers or just a photogram. You can make some really, really cool work with this. And you can also do layers of cyanotype coating. So you can make an exposure, coat something more. You can really, like, the sky's the limit. There's no rules. The only rules are like no sun until it's time to go, Let's see if there's any other resources I can send everybody. I think those are the big ones. Oh, I guess if you ever have any questions for me that you think of maybe after tonight or anything, probably the easiest way to get in touch with me, I have a contact page over on my website, and my website's just my last name.com. So that's marrash.com. That's going to be the easiest way to get a hold of me. That has a contact form with my email. I also offer one-on-one instruction kind of stuff, which is like what I'm doing here. We do a little Zoom thing and we talk about stuff, and we do a little show and tell. Yeah, that's cyanotype, or alternative process in general.
Very cool. Loved it, Matt. I'm inspired.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, Mark.
Hey, Matt. I want to remind everyone that coming up in a month or two, Val Pennington at Pennington Frame on Indianola is inviting folks to submit photography, but it has to be analog photography, and that is either traditional darkroom prints or alternative process prints.
Yeah, this would be a great way to kind of bump up the analog portfolio for that.
Very cool. So that's Pennington Frame, Mark? Is that what you said?
Pennington Frame on Indianola.
Okay.
And if you want to buy an original Renoir, he has some prints starting as low as $800 by Renoir.
An original?
Yep. Well, print.
Wow.
I mean, it's a graphic print.
Wow. Interesting.
Plus his whole collection of historical prints. It's good stuff.
Interesting. I've never heard of that place. Interesting.
Yes, and the Westbridge boys were lucky enough to have us hang next to the Renoirs.
They were what? What, Dick? What were they doing?
Renoir was lucky enough to hang with some of the Westbridge boys.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, we submitted to one of his he has an exhibition in the winter every year leading up to Christmas. It's called Size Matters, and all the entries have to be, the images have to be less than 100 square inches. And so Eric and Dick and I were in that, and we were in with other local artists and Renoir, and there was a Cezanne in there and maybe a Kandinsky as well.
Very cool. You guys are big time. We know so little about like this big time stuff you do. Jeez.
Donna, you should be honored.
What's that? I am. I mean, my God. I'm kneeling. I'm bowing. I have my video off. You can't see, but I am. Oh my goodness.
I can't.
Huh? Say that
I
again.
can't. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I just think they're doing all this stuff as boys. Just wait till they become men.
Oh, exactly, right. Oh, my God. We're all in trouble then, right, Richard?
I couldn't.
I don't know. If we grow up, I don't think we can do this.
No, no.
I know.
True.
It'll hurt too much.
That speaks to how we all need the kid to keep the kid in us alive, you know, tell you. All right, guys, this was wonderful, Matt. So
Thank you, Matt.
love seeing you.
Thank you a ton. Thank
Oh
you,
yeah,
Matt.
thanks for having me.
Matt, thank you for helping me spend more of my money in photography.
Same here.
Always.
Yeah,
Always.
Midwest better appreciate us, you know? It's like-
I'm sure they do. At this point, I have the shirt, but I only teach there. I try to be an enabler, but at least it's, you have a print when you're done, right? It's not just another box in the garage.
Exactly, exactly.
Matt, you're a crack dealer. Come on, us. Come on.
I really am. But this is the easy stuff, right? We haven't gotten to the hard stuff. The hard stuff's right over there, but we can get there.
I got a 4x5 waiting as soon as the sun comes out. You know what I mean?
There it is. It's already out. It's time. In fact, actually, here, one more shameless plug because I'll give you guys a sneak peek at something else that's coming out really, really soon. So I had only mentioned it really, really briefly, but the podcast that I've been on for over the last decade, it's called the Film Photography Podcast. You can also get really unique films that are really, really inexpensive over at filmphotographystore.com. And the cool thing about them is they have a few unique films that you can't find anywhere else. Like they have this old Russian aerial reconnaissance spy film that they sell. It's called FPP Retrochrome. So just stuff that like nobody had any purpose for a few years ago. We spooled it up and we put it in cameras. But alongside that, we also have a series of films which now go up to large format. And in that, they all have kind of goofy horror name themes. So we have Wolfman, we have Frankenstein, we have Dracula. And the only thing that our lineup of films was missing was the final monster, our high-speed monster. And that comes out in a few months. And that's The Mummy.
Mummy.
This is The Mummy, which is a 400-speed panchromatic film. And you might notice this box is about as big as my head. That's because we are going to be one of the few independent folks that offers up to 8x10-inch sheet film, which is a really cool thing.
Oh
That
my
means
God.
Mark has to buy one now.
I've already got
Yes.
one. It's a pinhole, but it is 8x10.
Well,
Oh,
now you
man.
got some high-speed stuff. This is great.
Wow.
I was going to ask you about that. Where do they manufacture all that? Where do you have to go?
That is unfortunately, that part is a trade secret. But all the information on the FPP Monster films is at filmphotographystore.com with all the developing and all the tech data stuff.
You do 120 at 4x5 as well?
They do 35, 120, 4x5, 8x10, and he also has it available in motion picture, including if you have the old Super 8, the old 8mm Keystone crank cameras, and 16mm. So we cover everything. If it's vintage film, we've got
Oh, I could do a wood monster film now.
it. Yeah, exactly.
So what state you make it in and all that is a trade secret?
Unfortunately, it's all based out of Jersey where it's sold. So
They use Jersey swamp water.
yeah, don't drink that. Yeah.
I'm just overwhelmed at all the stuff that's out there available to play around with. And I just realized,
Mhm.
particularly as I'm listening to you tonight, just, this one teeny weeny little, narrow thing that I know about. I mean, just the stuff that's out there to play with and to learn about, it's fascinating. Jeez.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about photography is it never stops. If you unless you tell it this, unless you like get away from it, there are so many different facets you can get into. If something feels stale with your camera, you can start shooting macro or start doing alt process. There's so many different things you can shift over to. I think a lot of people get very tunnel visioned into just like one thing they want to execute, but really just like say, what am I feeling like? Because there's probably a photo process that matches the way you're feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. All right, guys, we could sit here and talk to Matt all night. Anybody else have anything, questions, comments before we end? No? All right. It was wonderful, wonderful to see Matt. Good to see everybody. And we will see you soon. Don't forget what Mark said, submitting photographs by next Monday for the salon, correct, Mark? And
Correct.
he'll be sending out an email just to make sure everybody knows about that. And
I'll send reminders.
okay. Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
And the
Thank you,
banquet
Matt.
at the end of
Thanks
the
again,
year.
Matt. Good night.
Bye,
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
See ya. Bye.